what's the deal with Fort Knox? Like, what's there? Like, there must be things that are kept there, like that aren't, they're very, very precious to the country because, to my knowledge, you can't go there. Like, it's just completely forbidden. Like,
Have you ever wondered where the United States keeps most of its gold? Well, perhaps
oh,
surprisingly, the answer is Kentucky. You see, under the management of the Department of Treasury, the United States Bullion Depository stores gold as well as other valuables belonging to the federal government. In this bizarre building that looks like a hybrid of a jail
wow, that's a solid concrete building right
and
there.
fort. And although what you can see above ground makes a strong impression, it's what's out of sight that really counts. So join me as we discover the United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox. I'm your host Ryan Sokash and you're watching It's History. With an outer wall of granite-lined steel and guard stations at each corner, the vault, often described as a fortress, consists of 16,000 cubic feet of granite, 4,200 cubic yards of concrete, 670 tons of structural steel, and 750 tons of reinforced steel.
Jeez, mate. I don't think a bomb would get through that place, would it?
Not to mention the electric fence surrounding the wall. Internally, steel plate,
In terms of like being able to like blow a hole in the side of it. No chance.
cylinders, and I-beams encased in concrete make up the vault's structure. In other words, this is no man's land. Chosen employees have their combinations to enter the facility, but the main vault door is rarely used. A back door is used for transporting goods in and out of the vault. There's also an escape route in the case of an emergency where an employee gets stuck inside the vault, only accessible if the doors are already locked. The security team is a part of the United States Mint Police, one of the United States' oldest law enforcement agencies on the federal level. Currently boasting approximately 147.3 million ounces of gold, the Bullion Depository is an extension of the US Mint.
Ah, how much? Dude, that's got to be like what? Many, many billions of dollars, right?
But how it ended up at Fort Knox is a very curious tale. Much of the gold within Fort Knox was previously stored in New York City and Philadelphia. Still, Kentucky was chosen as the home of the new depository in 1935 out of military concerns. At that time, the United States military was worried that foreign adversaries could gain access to American valuables if held in coastal cities. Hence, measures taken on the West Coast predate the Kentucky move, as many items stored in the San Francisco vault were shipped to Denver, Colorado, which is a story for another day. Kentucky was ideal. It's a landlocked state like Colorado, but it's also close enough to Washington, D.C. to be easily accessible for the federal government if needed. Well, this closeness is appreciated. Outsiders, including the federal government, have rarely accessed the site. Visitors are not allowed in Fort Knox without permission, and permission is seldom granted. In fact, to the best of our research, the United States Mint only lists 2 public visits in its history.
Wow.
The first on September the 23rd, 1974, and the second on August the 24th, 2017.
Wow, so almost 50 years apart. No, 40 years apart. 2 visits in the whole of it, like of its existence.
Considering the urgency of protecting America's assets, construction of the depository was planned to be rushed. Hence, in June of 1935, the U.S. Treasury made its plan public, aiming to complete the building within 2 months and a budget of $450,000. Anyhow, production moved fast as Fort Knox was moved from military to Treasury jurisdiction in August of 1935. However, formal construction did not begin until 1936, ultimately costing $110,000 over the proposed budget. Additionally, it took until the end of the year for the project to be completed. Geographically, Fort Knox is hidden by the Appalachian Mountains, which creates a barrier against airborne invaders. So, along with the political motivations to change locations for the depository, the military was satisfied with Fort Knox's protection against invasion as well.
Do you ever think someone's like tried to break in here? They must have. They must have probably impossible, right? There's probably like so many secret booby traps and things.
Well, just a month after construction was finalized, gold began to be shipped to Fort Knox on January the 13th. Sent by the United States Postal Service, the gold was assisted by military personnel and Secret Service agents as it made its journey from Philadelphia to Fort Knox. The massive action was described as, quote, a mammoth gold hoard by the January 13, 1937 issue of the Owensboro Messenger. This shipment of gold was estimated to cost around $2 million, with the total planned shipments estimated to be worth $4 million. The second shipment was completed
$4 million what at that time? So like not in today's money.
By March the 1st, 1941. The then Secretary of Treasury, Henry Morgenthau Jr., publicly shared his transaction, which took 45 trains and 7 months to complete. In addition to gold, the depository also stores precious artifacts and historical documents belonging to the federal government. So as you might imagine, as the Second World War began in Europe, the Library of Congress grew worrisome about the safety of its prized American treasures, as they were stored in Washington, D.C., not too far off the coast. With that in mind, on December the 26th, 1941, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, and the Gettysburg Address were among the documents moved to Fort Knox. Additionally, the Lincoln Cathedral's copy of the Magna Carta, which was borrowed from the United Kingdom, was also exported to the depository. However, these items were not all kept in Kentucky permanently. As security improved around 1944, many records were returned to the Library of Congress. However, Lincoln Cathedral's copy of the Magna Carta document was not returned to the UK until after the war. As the end of World War II came, the sense of urgency in the States subsided, but after a brief calm period, the Cold War came around.
And you can bet that there's all kinds of other valuables that are in there that haven't like been made public. You know, all kinds of things must be in there.
And Fort Knox became more important than ever. While the depository was built with gold storage in mind, it continued to hold other artifacts after World War II. One prominent example was the Crown of St. Stephen, which was entrusted to the United States by the Royal Hungarian Crown Guard, along with other Hungarian jewels in need of protection against the Soviet Union. In fact, even before being sent to Kentucky, the Hungarian jewels were protected by American authorities in Germany. Fortunately, once things stabilized, Hungary received its jewels back in 1978. During the Cold War, the Defense Logistics Agency, which supplies the American military with necessary goods, became concerned that the US would lose access to opium and morphine if war broke out. So it was arranged that Fort Knox would start to store enough of each drug to last at least a year. Beginning in 1955, the drugs remained in the vault for almost 40 years.
40 years, but is it even still like, you know, is it past its sell-by date? Because usually medication has a use-by date, and it's like, you know, usually like a couple of years, max.
By 1993, the Cold War was over, but the opium and morphine remained, unable to be sold without the consent of Congress. The drugs were eventually phased out of the depository and are no longer stored there today. Although an extension
I wonder what happened to him.
of the federal government, internal access to Fort Knox is minimal, and no one is exempt from this rule. For example, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president at the opening of this depository, is the only US president in history to have entered the depository. The doors of the depository remained closed until...
Wow, are those the doors? It's like a bank vault. That door, mate, you are not getting through that, even with like a pneumatic drill. Even with like dynamite, you're probably not getting through this door.
1974, when members of Congress and the press were granted entry to inspect the vault. At the time, there were rumors that Fort Knox was secretly empty, so this tour was publicized to squash the claims. Led by the director of the U.S. Mint, Mary Brooks, representatives including John H. Rousselet, the group bore witness to the sheer amount of gold still contained inside the vault. Representative Rousselet claimed that the rumor would have to be a massive conspiracy due to the sheer volume of contents inside the depository. From there, the doors of Fort Knox once again remained closed until 2017, when President Trump's Secretary of Treasury, joined by State Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, visited the facility with the state governor and other elected officials. The Secretary of Treasury later recalled that he was the first Secretary of Treasury to visit the fort since 1948.
Dude, I want to go, man. I want to have a look. Can you imagine how much gold is going to be in there? Like all those bars of gold. Oh my God. Just...
The bullion depository has become well known for its security, with the phrase safe as Fort Knox regarded to mean high security and safety. Although there have not been any documented cases of break-ins, Fort Knox has frequently become the setting for break-ins in popular culture, most famously the James Bond novel and film Goldfinger, both featuring the namesake antagonist attempting to access the site for financial gain. In reality, there was at least one report of a man who attempted to enter Fort Knox without permission, and this happened in 2022.
Oh wow, this was recent.
Police killed him on site before he could enter the building. The burglar managed to drive through the main gate and...
They what? They ended him? Hang on a minute.
At least one report of a man who attempted to enter Fort Knox without permission, and this happened in 2022. Police killed him on site before he could enter the building. The burglar managed to drive through the main gate and attempted to escape security to no avail. It should be noted here that the police officers only shot the man after he attacked them with his car.
Okay.
And so it seems that the legacy of Fort Knox continues to prevail in pop culture as it does in reality, as the secure vault that has kept American and Allied treasure safe for nearly 90 years. And we'll leave it there for
Great video. Dude, I'm so curious. I want to see some pictures of the gold vault. I'm sure they've not released any photos because it might give people ideas if they think they can kind of like find weak points, like to try and break in. But like, can you imagine how much gold is in there? We're talking about the US like reserve of gold. Like it's got to be like hundreds, if not thousands of bars of gold. Just insane. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.